So hey there fellow YouTubers, Frank Bush here again. So in today's video I plan on showing a simple do-it-yourself modular ropecraft system. So in a video or two ago that I produced on my channel, I showed how to do a modular ropecraft system using hollow braided Kevlar rope. And I had a few comments that were left on the channel of, hey, can you do a version that uses Bankline or Paracord, something that's more commonly used within the bushcraft community, so that users don't have to buy specialty cordage and that kind of stuff. So that's exactly what I'm going to do in this video. So if you're interested in that kind of content, stay tuned. Okay, so our first order of business, I'll just walk through the equipment and tools and that kind of stuff I'll be using for this project, yeah? So this is number 36 tarred Bankline, which is commonly used in the bushcraft community. It's got a strength of about 320 pounds or so, to give you an idea of the cordage I'm using. But it's really flexible, and I'll talk about using paracord as well in this build. I've just got my trusty little pocket knife, because I need to have a knife to cut the cordage with. I've got a Bic lighter and a measuring tape. So, basic tools. Nothing complex when it comes to this build at all. You could have a 10-year-old kid do this with ease, if you will. So I'll shift camera angles and we'll just get on with the build now, yeah? So the very first thing I want to do is just take my measuring tape and kind of lay it out a bit. And these measurements are all super simple when it comes to this entire kind of modular build out. So needless to say, I'll just take the cordage that I have, just pull out a bit of length of it. And just set that down. I want to measure out a 1 foot section of this now. So just go to the 1 foot mark. I'm just going to fold that right at that point in time. I'm going to press it to give me a hold point. So I'm going to walk that back out against the line. And then right here, I'm just going to stop and put a little overhand knot. So this will be the first kind of knot in the project. And these are really simple knots I'll be using in this project. There's nothing to them. So just, like I say, basic overhand knot. And then what I'm going to do is just kind of slide that up so that's up near the end of where I folded it over, yeah? And like I say, that was a 1 foot length. So I'll just check that now. With the knot, I lost about an inch or so, which is fine. And now the thinking as you go, when it comes to kind of advancing this, I'll just set this over to the side. So hopefully it keeps it clearer on the camera. So the thinking really is, from this knot, I just want to walk back up towards this loop that I have here. I just want to walk back up about 1.5 inches, 2 inches or so. Not a huge amount. I'm just going to put another overhand loop here. So nothing complex. And as you can see, hopefully you'll see by the spacings and stuff, giving it a bit of space in between them, but about 1.5 inches, 2 inches. This doesn't have to be exact science stuff. That's one of the good parts about this modular ropecraft build. It's simple knots and it's not exact in its nature, but it'll function easily even with some subtle variance into it. So I'm going to put another knot into that. I'm going to space that about the same. And then one more knot. Now with this knot, and like I say, it's all just simple overhand knots that we're tying. Now with this knot, I want to make sure that the loop on this side is half decent size. So it's about even, if you will. And it's just that simple. So I folded the line over on itself at a 1 foot length and then tied 4 overhand knots back against itself, which leaves me with a loop on the end. So now the next step in this process is going to be turning around and measuring this out again to a 1 foot length. I'll figure out what that is. So I'll just pinch and hold it at that point in time. I'm going to need a bit more of the cordage. And when it comes to using the tarred Bankline, so like I say, I've got the 1 foot length there. Now from that 1 foot point, I'm going to go out 1 more foot and then 1 more foot again. Now this is the point where I'm going to cut my cordage. So the overall length of the raw Bankline that I was using to begin with ends up being a 5 foot length. So I'm just going to cut that there, melt it, just so I don't have any fraying ends or any of that business. I'll just set that off to the side. Now I've got, like I say, the loop with the 4 knots, and it really is just running out a 3 foot length of cable here. As the additional. But I'm going to measure from the end we just cut. I'm going to measure it back on itself. And I'm going to say take that back to the 1 foot mark. I'm going to fold it there, and I'm going to do the exact same thing we just did in the beginning there, where I'll fold it back to itself. Then I'm going to just put a little overhand knot here. I'll feed that through. Cinch that up so the knot's nice and tight. Walk it out. Like I say, about 1.5 inches, 2 inches or so. And once you get making these, they can become really rapid to do. It only takes 2 or 3 minutes to actually put together a single one of these. So to give you an idea, if you wanted to throw together 20 of these, you could easily do it within an hour's time and not feel like you were rushing or any of that business, right? So, and that's it now for this modular components. So here's one of them completed. So what I'm going to do, and I've already gone off and done some of them, but the thinking really is these are the base modular Ropecraft components that we're going to work with now. And I'm going to want to go off and make a set of, well, really as many as you want. I'm in this example, I'm going to probably do off about 20 of them. And that way, when I shift and we have these built, I go off into the field, I've got enough of them to show you some of the flexibility of working with these out in the field. But that's my thinking now, is hopefully that example was really elementary. I mean, to me, there's not much to these things. But like I say, I'll go off and make a stack of these, and then we'll take them out into the field and we'll start to work with them and show you exactly how good these are at being flexible and reusable when you're out in the field. So just give me a few minutes and I'll start mass producing these, if you will. So, and as you can see, I have up to 16 of them now that I've done off. And like I say, they only take about 2 or 3 minutes a piece. I'll walk through it one more time of exactly how I made one of these. I'll do off another 4 more, and then we'll just take them out into the field and start showing the example of using them, yeah? So like I say, I'll walk through in detail of making one more of these here. And I'll discuss if you wanted to use Paracord versus using Bankline as well to achieve this, and kind of the measurement differences, yeah? So right now with the Tard number 36 Tard Bankline, I'm measuring them out to be 1 foot lengths. If you're using Paracord 550 Paracord, if you were using that length, because the diameter of the cordage is a little thicker, you'd want to use 18-inch lengths instead of a foot. So your overall for each one of these would be 6 feet of 550 Paracord being used rather than 5, yeah? So really using things like Tard Bankline is a little more ideal in that regard, because you're just burning through a little less cordage as you're wanting to make these units, and when it comes to the strength, yes, 550 Paracord has, 550 pounds of strength, and this only has about 320 pounds of strength. But when it comes to using these out in the field, most of the time, like 99% of the time, you're not pushing the cordage to the maximum strength of its capacity when you're using it to do tasks out in the field. So I see it as a moot point. You're better off to go with kind of lighter cordage that it takes less cordage to do, and hence I'm using the Bankline instead. And but as you can see, they're simple overhand knots. I'll come up close just to make sure that all I'm doing is wrapping it around my finger, kind of creating that loop then, and then I'm just feeding it through the end remaining, and I kind of pull them and then adjust it to be kind of evenly spaced. And it's just that simple, little overhand knots, right? And then I measure out, like I say, 1 foot. If you're doing a Paracord version, you want to keep this part at being 1 foot, but then when you're measuring out the next 2 measurements, you'd want 18 inches instead of 12 inches if you're using Paracord. But because we're using the Bankline, I'll do a foot and then a foot, and it's right at that point. I just fold it so I know where it's sitting at. I'm going to grab my knife, clip this a bit, burn the ends, and I'll show you the measurements of how long each one of these are. It starts off with 5 foot of Paracord, but it shrinks down because we're putting these knots on the lines and stuff, and really when it comes to the 550 Paracord, because the diameter of the line is larger, the knots end up taking a little bit more of the length as well. But like I say, from the end I just cut, I'll measure this back to the 1 foot. At that 1 foot, I'll just bend it, fold it on itself, come to that end, and do the exact same thing. Just these simple little overhand knots. Like I say, this is something you could do sitting around the campfire. You know, it's a really elementary task of, you know, as long as you've got a way to measure a foot in length, you can whip these off pretty quickly. This whole project would literally take less than an hour to make like 20 of them. So, you know, this isn't something like I've shown, I did the ultimate bankline, ridgeline, and those types of things where I'm using locked brommels and that kind of stuff. And those are far more time, you know, consuming, if you will, to make those sets and that kind of stuff. Whereas these are rapid, simple, and you can achieve about 95% of the functionality you can off of like the ridgeline videos that I did using the bankline and that. And as you can see, there's another completed one. And what I'll do, sorry, I know I'm kind of bouncing around in the conversation. What I'll do is I'll see if I can catch this on camera, but I'll just measure this out a little further. Let me see here, where are we at in the camera? I'll see if I can adjust the camera back a little bit. And I'll tell you the exact length of these. So they started off as 5 foot lengths of cordage, and the finished length is about 2 foot 4 inches. So to give you an idea, you're losing, you know, half the length of the cordage you started with just in doing this process. And when you step up to the paracord, it becomes even more so. You'll get the same roughly 2.4 inches with the paracord, but it costs you a starting length of 6 foot of paracord, whereas with the bankline, it only takes 5 foot. So you do lose some length in the cordage that way, and that's part of just assembling these units, yeah? But what I'll do is I'll go off camera now. I'll make a couple more of these, get it up to the fact that I have 20 of them, and then we'll start to step out into the field and show examples of using these. All right, so I went and whipped off a few more of these bad boys, and I've got to the point where I've got 20 of them now. And before we go out into the field, there's one more or two more things I want to show you, just because it's easier to show you with the white backdrop and all that kind of stuff than when we're out in the field, yeah? So I'm going to show you linking these together and using them with each other and that kind of stuff, yeah? So I'll just take the stack and I'll just set that to the side off camera for a second. I'll just grab one of them now. So if you've watched previous bushcraft videos of mine, you'll know that I like using a lot of loops to do things out in the field. And I'll show you how you can just use a single one of these components to quickly form a loop. So if you turn around and take one end and you kind of hook it on itself as such, hopefully, here, I'll do that one more time. So you take the loop, you just kind of put your fingers in, hook it on itself, form a little lark's head, and that just slides there. Now what I can do is I take the other end of that, make sure I'm on camera, right? I take the other end of that, and I just pop it through there, just past that first knot, and then I allow it to tighten up. And now that gives me a knot where this is now a loop of cordage, where I can, you know, it's not going anywhere, and I could adjust the size of that loop. If I decided to put that little lark's head down further and that kind of stuff, I can make it a little smaller. And when it comes to the normal loops that I keep in my bag, I tend to keep 28-inch loops, and this is almost the same as that. I think it's about a ½ inch off or so, so I can easily double them up on themselves for using to make tripods and that kind of stuff, and I'll show that in future examples further on in this video. And as you can see, to pop it back out again, I simply just slide that, pop that off, and I'm back out. So there's really not much to it when it comes to you know, that kind of stuff. You can also turn around and feed the loops in if you just wanted them quick release. You put, you know, kind of open up one of the little pockets here behind the first knot, or, you know, one of the knots, and I slide that in just to get my knot through, and then when I apply tension, it locks. Now I can do that where I've got a locked loop now, but it's not permanent. I can easily quick release that, and it's hard to give justifiably, but I can easily, I'm applying tension now between here and here. Now I can quick release that and pop it and it just comes off. So if I want to use this as kind of a quick release loop, I can, or if I want to use that little lark's head knot and lock it in so it's more permanent, I can do that as well, right? So now I'll just grab a second one of these components and now daisy chaining these together. So it's really as simple as I can turn around and open up the loop of one, feed the other through just a little bit, and then pull the remainder of it through. And I've connected those together where it just now acts like another knot in the line where I can apply tension here and it'll lock, or I can apply tension on this side and it'll lock. But it acts like just another one of kind of the knots with loops in it. But when I want to pop that apart, simply kind of loosen it back here with the tension, I can pull them apart from each other and they just come back apart again, yeah? So I can connect them in that manner, or I can turn around and do like I did earlier with the single one where I just form a little lark's head knot in the cordage and then feed the other one through as such, and just allow that to apply tension. Now those are locked together that way, where I now have, you know, kind of a longer extended line. But I also have this additional little loop here that I can use for my own purposes, if you will, when I have this set up as kind of ridge lines and those types of things. So it has its purpose in that regard. So I just wanted to kind of show two of the basic connections when it comes to linking these together. In fact, I'll even show the quick release of combining these two. So I'll just pop that lark's head again loose. Well, first off, I'll show you. So, well, here, yeah, let's just pop that off. I'll walk through that as the next thing. So, and you could easily turn around and have these connected together when under tension, where exactly as I showed earlier, I just open up the loop behind, I stick it through so that knot's on, and then when I apply tension to this line, they'll kind of lock and hold to each other. And, but you can see it's got that quick release element, you know, that it's not the most stable to connect to that way. So you're far better off to turn around and connect with lark's head, or just hook the loops into each other. But if you wanted something that was pressure sensitive, say you were doing traps and that kind of stuff, where I set that through and just had it where it was under that tension, if I set this line back out through and hooked it onto a trip line or something, I could have it that it easily broke that line, if you will, and allowed it where those became separate lines. And if this was, like I said, set up on like a tensioning system where I wanted to put trip lines and traps and that kind of stuff, it's easily doable using that construct. But you wouldn't normally do it unless you were doing kind of pressure sensitive traps and that kind of thing. So I know I'm kind of going off on a tangent, but let's take these 20 units now and bring them out into the field and start to show you some further examples of some of the functionality you can have with these systems. And one of the good parts about using these constructs is you can easily put them together or break them apart, you know, just using a lark's head knot in most cases, you know, which is one of the most simple knots out in the field. But it allows you to reclaim your cordage and use the same cordage over and over again for different projects when you're out doing bushcraft stuff. You know, I made these to go along with some of the ultimate ridge lines and those types of things that I've done in previous videos to complement them. I could easily turn around and hook this on, and I'll show that further in an example, to be like the drop lines you use in the ultimate ridge lines and those types of things, or the modular ropecraft systems that I've shown in previous videos. This technology interoperably works with all of those things. And when it comes to most of the ridge lines you've seen, if you've watched you know, a couple of my previous ropecraft videos about ridge lines and guy lines and those types of things, all of this stuff is interoperable with each other. So what I mean by that is I can easily turn around and use these with those other sets and have them interwork with each other so that, you know, they're compatible and that kind of thing. But like I say, needless to say, I'll stop ranting and I'll start to shift gears, and we'll go out into the field and start to show some of the examples of what we can do with this. All right, fellow YouTubers, I'm out at one of my local parks in the area, and I brought along a few things that I'm going to use as an example with my modular ropecraft system. So let me just get my poop in a group on this side. I'll switch camera angles and start to set things up and start to show you some of the examples of what we can do, yeah? Okay. So one of the first examples I want to show is doing the simple bag hang. I'll show it around a really small diameter tree such as this, and then I'll show you some variants you can do for around larger trees. But I've just got one of my single modular components here. I'm simply going to come around the tree, and I'm going to wrap it back on itself, and then I'm going to take the knot that's in the end by the loop, and I'm going to bring it back on itself and just feed it through one of the little loops that was on that same strip of cordage, and just kind of poke it through the hole. And then I'm going to allow it to apply tension there. And now I'm locked onto this tree. I'm on, I can reef on that, I'm not going anywhere. When it comes to the stability of that, it's totally connected solid, but I can turn around and take this loop and pull it, and it's all quick release. I'm off. So there was no knots needed to hook this onto the tree. So like I say, I'll just hook it around, I'll feed it back through the loop itself and set it on. And you'll see this example as we go through the video, so it'll become really clear of exactly what I've done here. And I know with the dark cordage it's difficult to see, I understand that, but I was requested for Bankline, so here we are. So now I'm going to pop off my backpack now, and in my backpack, let me just make sure I'm getting this on camera, I've got a small little tiny hand loop, if you will, that sits on my backpack. Now all I'm going to do here is take the other end of this modular component, feed it through, and then I'm going to take one of the knots and bring it up and feed it onto itself and just push it through. And that's locked on now, it's not going anywhere. I can apply tension right here. It's not going to break, it's not going to, you know, there, let me adjust my camera. Go. One way or the other, I'm strapped onto this tree and it's not going anywhere. So I can hear a dog freaking out in the background. I'll pause, I'll shift angles and give a real close-up of what I'm doing here, and then we'll move on, yeah? But with just a single modular component, you can see I can do a bag hang successfully. So just give me a minute for this dog to pass. Okay, so I've moved my camera angle in a bit. You know, the dog's still out in the background, but such is life. And I'll just pop this off to kind of show you up close as best I can. So as you can see, that just quick releases from here, and then the bag can just slide out off those knots and it's free. So all I'm doing is sliding the end in. I'm taking one of those knots that's sitting on the line, and we got 4 of them. I'm bringing it back up on itself, and just one of the little gaps in between the knots that we did there, I'm just feeding it in through one of those and allowing the tension to pinch and lock and hold that knot. And then this tab just becomes a little quick release where I can pull it off. Now I did the same up on the top part up here. Let me pan back out. Up on the top where I've hooked it onto the tree, I did the exact same construct here. So both sides of this become quick release that I can just pop it and go, yeah? And like I say, this is a small diameter tree, and it's allowed me to only use one of these little modular Ropecraft components. And then I'll switch up to a larger diameter tree and show you, but there is quite a few options that are available when it comes to this construct, and you'll start to get the feel of it as we walk through the video. But one way or the other, I'll step this camera back and just show you now if I can easily adjust the height of where this is sitting on the tree as well, and then we'll go over to a larger diameter tree. So like I say, this was all hooked on with just a single one of those components that we made, yeah? But now I can, if it's a smaller diameter tree, I can loosen it up here and just shift it up the tree and then allow it to apply tension again. And I've adjusted the height of my bag to bring it up so that it's right where I want it to be. I can easily get into things. It's super simple. And if I don't like how this is all strapped to the tree up at the top, I can easily just pop it off. There was no, like I say, no knots needed. You're literally stuffing the knot through the little loops in between the knots. So it's super elementary that way. So I'll pop that all off completely now. And now that I'm set back, I'll just set this down for 2 seconds and I'll show you a real-time kind of the speed of setting this up, yeah? So I simply come around the tree, I hook it over, put it onto itself, set it in, I lock it, allow it to apply a bit of tension, I grab my bag, feed it through that little hand part, open up one of the loops, push the knot through, and I'm on. It's just that simple. That bag's up off the ground, and that way you don't get moisture coming in your bag from underneath and that kind of thing, and it makes it way easier to access your kit. And it literally took a single one of these to do. So, you know, there was no foreign stuff needed off the land. I didn't need to make toggles or any of that business, all with what, 2 foot 4 inch piece of cordage, right? So needless to say, I'll shift up to a larger, there's some bigger trees in the area, and I'll show that you can easily kind of adjust how you're doing things, that you can go around whatever diameter tree you want with this kind of construct and just hook your bag up and get it up off the ground. So I'll do that now, yeah? So if you remember now, earlier in the video when I was back at the house, I showed how you could daisy chain together more than one of these, yeah? So I've done the one where there's just a little lark's head knot that's connecting them together. Now, because of the diameter of this tree, it's a fair size bigger, so it's easy enough to turn around and I'll just put another lark's head in and connect a third, if you will. So I'll feed that through, set it on. Just as simple as that. I've got 3 now strapped together. Now I'm just gonna bring this around the tree, and I've got options here. Because I've got the loop that's sitting down on the one side, I could easily just take the remainder of this cordage, feed it through, and I'm on that tree and I'm hanging. And I can do exactly as I was showing earlier, where I just pop my bag, I turn around, and in here, I feed that through, slide it on. Now, because I'm not the small diameter and stuff, and I didn't want to have it in a small space, you know, I'm dealing with larger mass here, if you will. It's easy enough to take the modular components where I had the 4 knots on the one side and just bring them up and bring up any one of those knots to whatever height I want and hook it into one of the knots on its opposite side and just set it in place in that regard there, so that I get total flexibility when it comes to being able to hang this. As you can see, it's back up to a good height now where I'm easily able to do things. And going around this larger diameter tree took me 3 instead of 1. You know, but if it was an even bigger tree, the area I live in, there's some massive trees. If I need to use 5 or 6 or 7 of these, it's easy enough to just daisy chain them together to be able to achieve these types of things, yeah? So, needless to say, that's kind of the simplicity of doing a bag hang. And when it comes to hooking these together to kind of get the tensions and stuff, it's exactly as I showed earlier in the video on the smaller diameter tree that's over here. It's the exact same thing. I was literally just pushing the knot through the loop, and I just find a spot where I know that there's, you know, some loops that I can feed through. And it's really that easy. If I want to pop that all off and switch it out, you know, I'm off the tree. There was no knots being tied here. It's, you know, there's nothing to it in that regard. And if I wanted to turn around and, you know, bring this back down and say, well, I want to reclaim one of these where I had that little lark's head knot that was sitting on the tree, or connecting these together, I simply grab the back of it just to break that knot, and I can free up one of my components, and I'm back down to having just 2 of them strapped together, you know. And I could bring that around the tree just the same and say, yeah, okay, it's really tight here now, so if I fed that through, you know, I was really trying to be conservative on my cordage. I fed that through now. You can see, obviously, because of the diameter of things, I'm not able to get a full bag hang, but it's only because I can't get enough of these knots through. But you can see, though, that it was easy enough to take these apart, you know, put them together, use them as I will, you know, without it being this kind of complex process. And when I do the lark's head knot joining these 2 together in that regard, it's easy enough to tell where that lark's head knot is sitting because this loop is there at the connector point. And it's really simple. I'll really make sure I get this on camera. It's really simple. If on the back of the lark's head knot I use to connect them, I just grab the back of it and pull, and it loosens that whole thing up enough where I can now feed the knot through that was connecting them, and they're 2 independent units again. So there really wasn't any advanced, you know, knots or anything else that was needed. And I'm back down to having these 3 individual components. So for efficiency's sake, you know, in this example, I'm just going to put my bag back up on the small tree so I have more of these available, and we'll move on to the next examples, yeah? Okay, so I've got 3 sticks here I'm going to use to set up a tripod. Now, if you remember earlier in the video, I showed how to make one of these components become a loop just by forming the little lark's head knot in it. So I'll do that now, put a little lark's head, and then I just fed the end through, got it past the point of the first knot, and then just tighten it up. And it allowed me to have this kind of locking loop, yeah? With a, now it's got a little loop sitting on the end, but I'm now going to turn around and take this and double it up on itself as such, so it's like that. And I'm going to bring this over to these woods, these 3 pieces of wood, and I'm going to whip them together to form my tripod. So I just kind of take these 3 pieces of sticks that I have. They're about 6 foot in length, and they're about the width of my thumb, maybe a bit wider, to give you an idea of the size of the diameters that I'm dealing with. And I'll slide it over all 3 sticks here, so it's down about 6 or 8 inches or so. And now I'm going to take the middle stick out of the 3, and I'm just going to start to turn it and allow it to wrap onto the other ones and bind up on itself and start to form tension. So as I kind of twist these sticks, they just become tighter and tighter and tighter, to the point where it replaces like lashing and frapping and that kind of stuff like you normally do in a tripod form. And as you can see, in a matter of seconds now, I have my tripod up, and I still have the loop tag. It's kind of small and compact with the way it's kind of set into itself, but I've still got my loop that was on the little loop that was on the ring, the little loop sticking off the side. I've got it still sitting here. So I'll come up closer now and just show a close-up of this, and we'll start to do a full cook kit hang here using these components. But as you can see, it only took a single one of these modular Ropecraft components to even get this tripod to begin with. So like I say, I'll shift camera angles, I'll come in close, and we'll start to walk further through this process, yeah? Okay, so I'll try to give you a kind of a quick walk around to just show you how it tightens up on itself. I know this is going to be the most elegant camera work, but it gives you an idea of how it just kind of self tightens just by turning that inner stick. And you can see right here, that's where I've got the loop that was sitting onto the line. So I'll just set my camera down right here for a second. Hopefully it'll give you a bit better stability when it comes to things. And like I say, I've got the loop sitting right there. It's easy enough now, right off of this loop, to take another one of my modular components and just, I can do the pass that through. I just grab the rest of it, bring it up through, pull it back and allow it to have a bit of tension on that line, and it's hooked on now, and I'm connected to that. And now I've got kind of a hanging line, and I can just, based on, you know, the height of my tripod and that kind of stuff, I can determine, do I need to put a second one of these and just daisy chain on a second one or not. So I'll step the camera back now, and I'll grab one of my pots as the example and hook it on here to show kind of the flexibility of using it as a cook kit, yeah? So give me 2 seconds, I'll shift camera angles, grab the pot, and we'll kind of get to the next scenes. Like I say, as part of the example, I brought along just a cooking pot with a bail handle, which I often use. If you've watched previous bushcraft videos of mine, you'll have seen this used out in the field lots in those videos. But in essence, it's just a pot that has a handle on it that allows me to hang things over fires. And that's exactly why I decided to go with pots that have bail handles on them, is because they can serve purposes for exactly this kind of construct. And as you can see, it's just got a little handle on it that allows me to kind of hold it by that instead of having handles on the sides and that kind of thing. And I can see that my modular Ropecraft system here, I can see that this is a little low for, you know, an ideal setup. So I'm just gonna turn around and lark's head on another one of these and just kind of connect it. Now I've got my extension where now it's able to hang fairly low. So when I turn around and hook that onto the bail handle of my pot, I can now bring that up to whatever height I choose within reason and say, yeah, I'm just going to pick a spot that I want to have it in, where I know that I can hook into a knot with the loop like I showed earlier in the video. And now I'm on. And that's on there, it's not going anywhere. I'm able to adjust this tripod so I can adjust the height of it and the position of it sitting over the fire with granular level control. You know, so it's really flexible in that regard. And if I don't want to have it at this position, I want to adjust things, you know, it's easy enough to say, oh, did I want to have that a bit higher? I just bring it up a little bit, hook into another one of the loops in between the knots, and set it into that position. And it's locked. I can apply all the weight in the world on that. It's not going anywhere. Like, you know, I'm applying good weight here. If that was loaded with lead bricks, they would still be enough to sustain that. So I'll come up close and show a kind of a close-up of this setup, but it's not much different than how we hung the bag or anything else. And as you can see, this took 3 of these modular components. So with the small tree diameter holding the bag And now this tripod, we've only used 4 out of the 20 components that we made in total when it comes to utilizing these things out in the field. And it's allowed us to have a cook system, like I say, where we can adjust that over the fire with ease, you know, and position it exactly how we want, sitting over the flame, you know, or, you know, if you want to get it up off the flame or whatever. And it's easy enough to even take this stuff and just wrap it around the top if you feel like, you know, you want to bring it up entirely and get it up off the flame. That's all easy enough to do with, you know, no complexity involved. And it's all stable. But if I want to pop that off in quick release, it's easy enough to turn around and take that all off. I'm back off. That pot's free now. I'm not connected to this rope system at all, right? And if I want to keep that up at the flame, I can simply just let it sit and hang. So it's really, really simple, you know, to use these types of constructs without really having to tie any knots out in the field, and without having to have specialty gear like the Kevlar rope and the braided, you know, braided Kevlar rope I did before. I did that for myself as more kind of a professional grade version, because I know things like the tarred Bankline aren't as heat resistant as Kevlar, and I kind of kept that in mind when I was building out the Kevlar system, knowing that I'll be using this a half decent amount of time for exact setups like this, where the cordage is going to be exposed to higher temperatures, you know. And this Kevlar, or sorry, this tarred Bankline, I believe it's about 160 degrees Celsius, don't quote me on that, but I know that the melting temperature of this cordage is far lower than like a Kevlar line would be, you know. And that was one of the reasons why I went with the Kevlar. I know the Kevlar isn't as UV resistant and those types of things, but often when you're out in this dense bush, you're not getting a lot of UV radiation on you anyways. You've got so much forest cover above you that you're always in a quasi shaded environment, if you will. So I wasn't as overly concerned about the weakening of the Kevlar rope, you know, from UV and all that. But like I say, that is specialty cordage, whereas this is more common man stuff. You know, you can go down to your dollar store, or, you know, hardware store, that kind of thing, and pick up tarred Bankline or Paracord and those types of cords. Really, you can do this kind of construct with any type of cordage, you know, whereas the other system I did with the Kevlar, you specifically need to have like a hollow braided cordage to do that kind of construct, right? But I'll stop rambling, and as you can see, we've got the simple cook kit set up. We managed to hang our bag. I'll switch camera gears now, or camera angles now, and we'll start to move on to another example in the video, yeah? So now, earlier in the examples, I kept showing using the lark's head knot, where you kind of roll it on itself, and then I'll, just take the other one, stuff it through, and then cinch it and lock it. And that made it where when these lines were connected together, it had this little loop. But now that I'm going to switch over to doing more like a ridge line and that kind of thing, I prefer to go the other method of connecting these together. One, because it gives an extra inch or two of cordage space, but two, because it gives enhanced kind of knots, if you will, where I turn around and say, just feed the one through the other, and rather than do a lark's head in any way, I'm just going to pull the entirety of that line through, as such, and let that sit like that. And that just makes it that I've got more knots kind of connected one after the other along the line as I go. It maximizes the cord length when it comes to doing a ridge line. And for me, I always sit back and say, well, I know if I want to find the one that I want to separate, it's always, because we did 4 of these before the loop, it's always the 5th one. So as I walk along, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That'll be the center. That's where the lark's head is. 1, 2, 3, 4 coming out the other side. And so it's easy enough for me to determine where is that loosening point that I just want to separate those components off again, yeah? But I prefer using this connector when it comes to doing stuff like guy lines and ridge lines and that kind of stuff. And I'll show as we go through the example of why. But I'm going to turn around and just hook together a bunch of these now, just so I can get some length large enough to do a ridge line example, yeah? So give me, I don't know, 30 seconds, and then I'll cut back to the next scene. Okay, so I daisy chained together about 9 or 10 of them. And I'm just going to use this stump to kind of as the example. The location I've been in has been in previous videos. I like coming here to do ropecraft examples, but such is life. So needless to say, I'm just going to come around that, and I'm going to take one of the knots that's sitting on these lines, and I'm just going to open up the pocket and feed that through entirely, and just pop it through as such. And then I'm just gonna start to apply tension, and I'm locked. I'm on to that. It's not going anywhere. And as you can see, it kind of pinches in around that cordage there and gives it that it has nowhere to go. So there's that way I can go, which is, you know, the most simple, or I can turn around and I'll just pop that back out for a second. I can bring it underneath and bring it around, and this is actually kind of a more preferred method, where I take the knot, then I fold it back on itself, open up one of its own pockets, and then feed that knot through here and make that just a quick release set right there. Hopefully the camera's getting that justice. And then I just apply tension, and that'll hold and lock as such there, and it's not going anywhere. I can apply immense amounts of tension, but either way, one way or the other, I'm strapped to this side of the tree. So I'll just walk out now and connect to the other side and show you how quick it is to set up in that regard. Yeah. Okay, so like I say, we're connected onto this tree stump here, which was the camera angle we were just looking at. I'm just going to walk this out now and come over to this other tree stump I have here. I'll simply wrap around that, and I can come up, pull it to give it a bit of tension, and I can do exactly the same as I showed earlier connecting onto that side. You can do the same connecting onto this side. I'm on, and that's rigid. Now this isn't going anywhere, it's solid, it's contained, it's all quick release, just as I showed with the bag and with the tripods and, you know, all that kind of stuff. All of these things are all, I just pull the little loop, pop the knot back out, and it all just falls to itself, right? But as you can see, there's firmness on there, so it's just that easy to set up, right? And if I wanted to stop and adjust things on this side, I can pop this side. It's just as easy. I'm quick released, I'm off. I can apply more tension here. Say, yeah, let's bring it a little further, bring it up, pop open one of the loops, push the knot through on this side, and I'm hooked on there. There was no knots being tied here, and like I say, this is all quick release as well, and now it's got even more tension to it. It's more firm, and I'll shift camera angles and go down to the other side and show you where you can do like a trucker's hitch and that kind of stuff to give you, you know, really good amounts of tension. But one way or the other, we now have a ridge line up, and like I say, I'll shift camera angles and go down to that side and just show you the truckers, just because there's a bit more spare cordage on that end. So let me take you down to the other end and we'll show you the trucker's hitch. Okay, and like I say, I just got a bit more room to work with down on this end, so I'll just pop this here, and it's as quick as that to come off, and I'm off the tree, it's loose. But if I want to, I can turn around and just feed my line through one of these openings, and I just want to pull all those knots through, all 4 of them. And now I've got that line where I had no knots on it because of the way we made these modular systems. Allows me to then pull back and apply like a trucker's hitch tension here and get it really, really tight. And now I can turn around and take one of the knots that I have sitting on this side and just bring it up when I get it to the tension that I want. And right now it's extremely tight. And I can pop it in on this side, and I'm hooked on. That's a super tight line. Like I say, we got a bit more tension. If I had even another one of these on and we wanted to pull from the next line out, I can do that and get even more tension. But as you can see, it's a flexible setup in that regard of, I'll shift this out entirely and I'll move it up to the next one up, and I'll just apply absurd amounts of tension now and see if I can get that in play. So let me shift camera angles here. I'll hook this on. I'll just hook that on, and you can see you can hook it on at so many multiple points. It's really easy to just find a point to hold it enough to give you tension while you decide to shift gears and adjust your setup. So if I want to kind of adjust where that trucker's hitch, I can still simply turn around and take the end of the line. I'll grab another one of my modular components. I'm just going to simply hook on another one of those to extend it another couple feet. Pop that through. Just that simple now. My guy line has been extended by what, 2 foot 4 inch or so, I think it was, if I remember correctly. And we now have that extra cordage, right? And so needless to say, I'll shift camera angles and we'll do a larger trucker's hitch to kind of show more of the being able to get high levels of tension in that. It was just everything was so short and compact here, it was hard to give a good example. But let me shift camera angles and we'll show you that. Okay, so I'll stand on this side to kind of keep it to the camera, and hopefully the angle gets a bit better. But like I say, just pop that, I'm loose, I'm off, and then I can just bring it up where I've got all this extra line. I can now bring this up to some arbitrary point that's out further and say, yeah, I'm going to connect onto here instead. I want to use this as my leverage point. And because I added on that one modular system, it now allows me to do everything up here now where I can run my line, right? So, and like I say, I can pull that back and it starts to get really, really tight. And if I want, I don't even have to hook that in here. If I can pull the knots of the next set through, it starts to get extremely tight to do it. But I can hook these in right here without bringing this back up on itself. But either way, I'll just do that for this example and just hook it into itself. And you can see I'm on. That's super tight. It's not going anywhere. And it was all knotless. I was able to do this all just with a bit of leveraging and that kind of stuff. Now I'll stop and show one or two more examples. I know I'm running out of light, unfortunately, so I'm going to run out of examples. But let me grab another one of these and kind of shift now and show you a couple examples of running the ridgeline. I know when I did the Kevlar rope line, I showed like using this like a clothes hanger or object hanger and that kind of stuff. So rather than set that up as a separate thing, I'll just do it on this line and we'll show that example just because I'm running out of daylight, if you will. But let me shift camera angles and we'll start to do some more quick examples of what we can do, yeah? Okay, so I've just got a little water bottle. And I showed this kind of stuff in previous examples, but I've got a little loop of cordage, and then this is just Paracord 550 cord. I'm going to form that same little lark's head knot, and I'm just going to feed that right around the lip of the bottle, as such. Hopefully the camera caught that all right. Now, because that loop had a little knot on the loop, it's easy enough to now turn around and say, all right, well, let's use that knot to just feed it through one of these loops. And it's, oh, this line's getting tight, so because of the tension we put with the trucker's hitch, it's hard to feed the large paracord through the tiny stuff, just purely because of tension. But you can see I managed to get the water bottle up and hanging. If this was Bankline that I was using to do this, it'd be far easier, obviously, but I'm trying to attach a larger diameter cordage to a smaller diameter cordage in that regard. But you can see I could use these types of constructs now to get stuff off the ground, right? Where I've got these knots along the line, and anywhere that there's these knots, it's easy enough to just do as we've done here and kind of hook that on, right? So it's really simple in that regard. I'll just set that there, and let me show you another example of kind of using this like the clothesline. And it's similar examples like I showed when I did the Modular Ropecraft system using the Kevlar rope and stuff. But let me just step the camera back a bit to show you that we can do that kind of stuff as well, yeah? Okay, so I just got the same old camping towel that I had in the last example. And so where these knots are with the loops, I can open them up and just feed through pieces of cloth and that kind of stuff, right? And use them almost like clothespins, where the tension of them just hooks and holds. This blanket's really getting to the end of its days, but I like using it just for out in the bush as a beater blanket, right? But as you can see, without having any clothespins or anything else, I was able to, hook this stuff on and kind of get it set up where I'm able to, have it that it's on the line, and I can apply some tension to it and that kind of stuff. And make it that it's air drying and all that kind of stuff without any clothespins or anything else. Obviously it's limited by where your knots are positioned along the line, whereas the Kevlar Ropecraft system I didn't have that kind of restriction. You could just put them anywhere along the line and it didn't matter, right? And then there's one other example. I'll just leave this here for a second, and we're going to turn around and now use one of those Modular Ropecraft components that we built out in the video here. And we're going to now use this to make it as though we were doing like an ultimate bridge line and that kind of thing, and show you how this modular ropecraft system can have the functionality of doing that stuff as well. So let me shift camera angles, we'll zoom in closer and we'll show you an example of that. Yeah. Okay, so now I'm just going to take one of my modular components and hook it onto another one of the modular components in a different way than we've done previously. So we had that 1 foot kind of single line spacing that exists, and here I'm just going to turn around and take the components and fold it on half of itself so that I've got just the loop of the smooth, if you will, the single lined, and I'm just going to take that and make a prusik loop right here where I'm just going to pull those components through, and I'm going to do that 3 times. I'm really trying to keep this in camera the best I can, but I know it gets tricky with the lighting and everything else and the black cordage and all that kind of stuff but such is life. That's the nature of the beast, if you will. So, and I'll just dress up that knot, and it's really just kind of rolling out, you know, the tension. And the thinking with these prusiks, as I've talked about in previous videos, is you want to keep them nice and clean and dressed up so that they all come together and look nicely, where you see 6 bands sitting side by each with this kind of line that comes across the back that lets you know you've done it properly, and you don't want any of those lines to be crossing over each other and stuff. But now I'll step the camera back now and kind of show you of what this does, because I don't think I'm going to have enough light to do a full tarp setup and stuff. But in essence, with these lines now, I can slide these the full distance between the knots in these open spaces to give me some level of flexibility where I position this. But as soon as I get to any point on the line, if I apply tension, it'll lock and hold that knot at that location. So it gives me that level of control, if you will, and I can adjust it and lock and hold at this location. So that's where this kind of using this prusik setup is really handy. I've got a 1 foot 1 foot distance here now that I can have these adjustabilities of the prusiks. Now I'll shift camera angles and I'll talk about tying into the tarps and stuff. Let me see. I'll have to check my clock and stuff and see how much I've got light, because I don't want to be filming in the dark. I know the GoPros are bad for that. Let me see if I get enough to do a tarp example, or if I'm running out of light for the day. But one way or the other, I'll talk about, you know, using these as kind of tarp tie-off points and that kind of stuff, which I've discussed lots in previous videos, but regardless, we'll go through that in this video as well. Yeah, so just give me 2 seconds to check my time and readjust my camera. Okay, I can see I'm getting tight for time in the light and stuff, so what I'm going to do is just use this water bottle as an example for tying off objects and that kind of thing. So I've got now these 2 lines that kind of drop off that prusik, which are just, you know, 1/2 of the modular components that we have, and it's easy enough to turn around and just slide those. Say this was a tarp tie out, and this can be a water bottle, it can be whatever you want to tie off to. I can easily turn around and just feed that through, bring it up, take my knot, hook it in, set it, and it's on. I'm locked on there. That water bottle is not going anywhere, and I can pull and yard on that all I want. It's being held on, and now I've got 2 tie points that I can use here easily enough, you know. And if I don't like the idea of this being quick release, like I say, this could be a tarp tie off point that we're just off to one point, and if you want to adjust the tension, you simply just slide the prusiks on the line to adjust some of the tension that you have in between the tarps, so you can easily kind of adjust tension in that regard. But if you don't feel comfortable with having this kind of quick release, especially with your tarp setups, because you know that some people are concerned about it. I don't get worried about it, but some people get concerned about those things. I'll just hook this up here for a second. I'm going to get it up and out of the way. And that's one of the good parts about this kind of construct, right, is you got lots of little points you can hook onto and do things with. But if you don't like the idea of that kind of quick release, especially on your tarp connections, and you really want to make sure they're secure, it's easy enough to do that exact same lark's head like we talked about before, where you just set that lark's head on one and then bring the other, feed it through your tie out or your grommet or whatever it is on your tarp, feed it through that, and then allow it to cinch up on itself, and that's locked now. That's not going anywhere. Now you've got a locked loop that you can work with, right? Easy enough. And if you want to kind of reverse that, you simply pull on the back of that lark's head knot, slide it out, and you're off again, and it's free. So you get really a high level of flexibility. I wouldn't say that this setup is quite as flexible as when it comes to working with the Kevlar rope system and the locked brommels and those types of things, because they allow me to slide these Prusik lines. They allowed me to slide them like 5.5 foot, you know, down the lines. So I've got a really wide range of being able to move these and apply tensions and everything else, you know, of whereas when it comes to these, you don't have quite the same level of, you know, flexibility and that kind of stuff, right? And when it comes to tarp tie-outs, there's a lot of different things you can do here. Of you know, I'll just grab a stick as an example, and say this was the tie-out that we were using for, let me make sure I'm just catching that in camera, we haven't wandered off camera. Yeah, okay, we're fine. So say this was the tie-out of your tarp that you just fed through. If you didn't even want to connect into the ease at all, you could easily just feed your tie-out through, you know, one of the loops in between the knots here, pop your tie-out through, take a stick, stick that through, and allow it to lock and apply, you know, just as you would in a very conventional bushcraft sense. You can still use toggles and that kind of stuff in this kind of construct. You're not restricted from doing that, right? But it allows you to kind of have that level of flexibility and that kind of stuff if you wanted to, right? So needless to say, I'll kind of stop here. I'll wrap the video up. I could easily show another, you know, 20 different examples of using this stuff, but really I wanted to cover, you know, some of the main core stuff, like hanging your bag, getting a tripod, getting a ridge line up and running, you know. Unfortunately, I just don't have enough light to be able to set up a tarp, but you've seen that in lots of previous videos. If you watch previous videos of mine of using the same kind of knot drop line to rapidly hook onto tarps and stuff, I do show that kind of content in previous videos. So if you're really kind of interested in that specific component, go back and watch the Frank Bush Ultimate Bankline ridgeline. I believe I use those specifically in the Ultimate ridgeline, the Frank Bush Ultimate ridgeline. I do it in that video as well, where I'm using these kind of knotted drop lines. So if you do watch previous videos, you'll see kind of the context of this. But hopefully I'll do some future videos when it comes to, you know, using this in other different ways, you know, setting up grunt bars for using the washing around in the woods, or building furniture so you can throw together a chair to sit on and that kind of stuff, you know, of building traps and those types of things. These modular ropecraft systems can be used for immense amounts of different things, and really I'm just touching on kind of the basic surface of them. You know, when you're out in the field, you start to try out different things and you realize the true usefulness of this. But like I say, I'll kind of wrap things up and end the video. I know my videos get long, but let me shift camera angles and we'll finish her off. Fellow YouTubers, well, thanks for sticking it out if you made it this far in the video to see these kind of modular ropecraft systems. You know, when you're using these out in the field, to me these are invaluable. You know, to build this entire construct of having 20 of these together took maybe an hour and a half out of the tarred bank line that I had, you know, and it was all simple overhand knots and that kind of stuff. There wasn't really a lot to it, right? You know, when it comes to doing these types of things, you don't necessarily need to have kind of high-tech equipment and all that kind of stuff. You know, stuff like this really helps simplify an entire camp. You know, when you looked at the fact that, you know, we hung up the bag, we managed to get the tripod sitting behind me here, we managed to get this tripod together, we managed to get the ridge line up. We were able to do all that. If you were doing that off camera in real time, you're able to do all that in a matter of, you know, 5-10 minutes. This stuff can become extremely quick to do, you know, and because it's all modular, you get a familiarity with using your stuff and you kind of get a feel for it, you know, of when it comes to a lot of bushcraft channels, they want to teach a lot of advanced ropecraft and all that kind of stuff, and to me, I'm of the approach of trying to keep it as simple as possible. You know, this is kind of stuff that you can easily have a 10-year-old kid learn how to do. You know, there's not much advanced technology or, you know, complications that go into building this stuff, and as you can see, it's all really easy to pop apart and, you know, put back into a bag. And when it comes to things, you know, but I know I ramble one way or the other, but hopefully you enjoyed this ropecraft technology, and like I say, hopefully in future videos in the near future I'll turn around and do some more examples of different things outside of what I've shown here, and show some of the true flexibility that can exist in this kind of system. And let me just pop this on for a second. But you can see I'm off those trees, and it wasn't even a job. And because these were all, you know, daisy chained together already, it's easy enough for me to take this whole thing and throw it back into my bag, you know, as just a little bundle of cordage, right? You know, there's nothing to that. This is easily packable into a bag with no complexity, right? But like I say, hopefully you enjoyed this content. I'm going to wrap it up at this point in time. I'll just pop this tripod apart. All I'm going to do here is just pop off the pot in that, and then that middle stick, I'll reverse wind it the opposite direction that I wound it up to begin with, and it'll all just fall apart, and I'll reclaim my gear. And as I showed with the bag hanger earlier and that kind of stuff, it's easy enough to just quick release all that and pop it off. But either way, hope you enjoyed the content. Thanks for watching, yeah? Cheers.